Hi, everybody. Um, so we are going to look at the market like we do every Friday. So this will be a weekly appointment. I will try this time. I will try to make it as short as possible because I want to focus on what the market is telling us at the moment. Um, and I'm going to assume you know a lot about the power law and our vision about the cycles, etc. You can watch also the previous videos where I give a more detailed introduction because sometimes my videos take 3 hours because I'm trying to explain everything from the scratch. The main idea that we work under, because we're trying to bring some scientific understanding about the cycle instead of using what other people do, like a TA or some arbitrary way of understanding the cycle. We are looking at these very precise regularity. So maybe for the people that never heard, very quickly, we think the cycle, the Bitcoin follows a very precise pattern where we spend 2 years along the support line created by the power law. That is, there are different ways of calculating, but usually the simplest way is about 60% from the general trend. What I did here, I superimpose the 3 cycles. Basically, I'm looking at today. This is where we are right now. And then I go back by 4 and 8 years. Then it's basically, this graph is showing where we are right now. This is the upper part. And in this case, the price and the date will be the correct, right? Right now we are 96,706. And then you can go to the previous cycles, and this is where the price was. Right now, for example, the previous cycles are the same day than today. So the date will be correct for the first cycle, the current cycle. As you go to lower cycles here, you will have to subtract 4 years. But the day will be the same, okay? Whatever day today is, that is the 29th of November. So 29th of November of 4 years ago, 29th of November, 8 years ago. And so this helps you to compare this cycle with the previous cycle. And this happens in life, So the price will be 8 years ago, just to give you a feeling, was 736 today. 8 years ago, we were moving much closer to the support line. The support line is this pink line that, like I say, usually is about 60% deviation from the general trend. The power law trend is this Y line. So for 2 years, we do that. We stay close to the support line. Sometimes we do deviate, like here, for example. It was very interesting because we kind of basically touched the power law, and then we had a correction. In the previous cycles, we actually went above, but also there was a correction. There was COVID, where the price bounced back from there. So it looks very much that we are still doing what we have done all the time, right? So all these people that talk about, there will be a super cycle. People mention super cycles all the time. I don't even know how to understand them. They don't have a clear idea. If I explain it, something that doesn't make much sense. Right now, if we do what scientists do, that is, you take the data that you have, and I don't understand when people say, you are basing this on the past. On what am I supposed to base? Anything you do in science or in reality is always based on what you learn from the past. And if there is a past where it's all chaos and there is not a pattern, there is not much to learn. Bitcoin is super regular. You can see from here, right? All the peaks happen in a very similar place. There is the question of this peak. This probably was a double top. We had a double top even in the first cycle. It's just that we didn't pay a lot of attention because it was smaller than the second top. So it's not completely unique. And but it seems that the real top happens always at the same time of the year, and in the same place in the cycle. Sometime the beginning of the bull market starts a little bit early, because one simple way of doing this, it's always looking at the end of the year. Seems that the major things, the peak, where the bottom is, where the bull run starts, it happens always at the end of the year. For example, right now, that is kind of close to the end of the year, the bull run started. This is very similar to how it happened last cycle. See, we were started actually early in October, mid-October, just a second. And this time we had to wait until November to actually have a bull run. But this is where I'm using this pink line, vertical line, to indicate the end of the year. But we are close enough, because you always have to think that whenever we have these boundaries or lines, it's always like a region. So we are close in this region where we can say, okay, it looks like definitely we have left this behavior where we kind of follow along the power law. We start to go in this exponential behavior. So Bitcoin can become exponential when everybody wants an exponential behavior. They don't realize that Bitcoin tries every cycle to do that, and then it doesn't like it, right? There's a way of thinking of it. But yeah, okay, let me try. If I do something exponential, what happens? If you do something exponential, you will crash, because this is what happened with exponential. We go too fast, and then we crash. And so it's actually cool, because the bubble allowed Bitcoin to have fun, for 1 year, then it needs to correct, and it goes exponential down. And it seems that it's unsustainable. The type of growth is not something that Bitcoin likes, and then it corrects itself, and where it goes back to the power law. This is the picture that we have right now. It's a picture that has not been challenged. It's real, and it's what Bitcoin has done for all this time. Now, thinking, because it's all wishful thinking, there is nobody, there are all these spaces, all these YouTube video, people coming up with all kind, the ETFs, Sailor, the reserve. It's a bunch of words. They don't even do the calculation. They don't say, okay, there is this and this and this, and when this amount of money come in, it has this particular impact. I never saw anybody doing that, because I did actually that calculation, and I show that we need about $200 million inflow per day right now to stay on the power law. That is much more than the ETFs or even Sailor bring in, because when I say every day, I mean even the vacation, even the holidays, even the weekend. So 200 million, and this 200 million is going to be 500 million in a few years from now, and then $1 billion, right? And we need an incredible amount of inflow to even stay on the power law. So the people will say it's different. I don't know what we are talking about. What do you think? Even the strategic reserve, we are talking about amounts that are not very different from what the ETFs. In fact, we are even smaller than what the ETFs bring in, also because it's going to happen if they pass the strategic reserve. It's going to happen over several years. People think, but that is, they will create they use this word game theory that is, it's not even the correct word to use for game theory. I think all these things will happen, but will be always proportional to where Bitcoin is. That is what the data says. And so far, this theory of a power law, that everything is proportional, everything happens in a particular pace, it's real. There is no evidence to the contrary. When we have a new information and it looks like there is something different, then we will have to study, understand it, and adapt our understanding of Bitcoin and come up with better models. But right now, this understanding, this picture, this coherent picture, as far as I know, please tell me anybody else that has such a coherent picture of all the aspects of Bitcoin, right? The fact that we are moving along a power law, the fact that we have these very precise cyclic patterns, that we can characterize them. I say exponential, it's kind of an overall exponential growth because it happened very quickly. It's a little bit more complicated because we have a periods where basically we stay kind of constant here. Actually, almost looks like we still go up a little bit, but we follow the power law. Then there is this burst of growth that during this time is exponential. Maybe not. It's like a composed exponential, right? There is an exponential here, and there is a flat period, and another exponential. Exponential in a log linear chart like this, where I'm taking the log of the y-axis, we look like a straight line. So if a path is close to be a straight line, it looks like an exponential. Quindi not quite, right? But it's the closest one. We could try to come up with some kind of equation, but it's more complicated because it looks like, for example, here it does look exponential when it does something else, and so it's more complicated. But we can say quote unquote exponential, mostly because it's not the power law. Now, when we go down, it's much closer to be a real exponential. Look at this, for example. Beside oscillation around the straight line, it does look very much like an exponential. In fact, it's kind of curious because how fast we go down along this exponential. You can also look at this angle. You see minus 13 degree, minus 16 degree, minus 14 degree. Very, very similar. While these degrees, you see, is 42 here, 32 here, and 20 here, right? 42, 32, 20. And it's clear even just by visual inspection, right? This line is much steeper than this one, much less steeper than this one, right? See, look at this. While these ones are all parallel. That is another regularity in Bitcoin. Very interesting. So I'm expecting these to be repeated again. There is no evidence to the contrary. And so we can zoom in and see what is going on. So 8 years ago, we didn't even start a bull market. We're still moving along this line. You see how actually the full model starts to bend a little bit up, and the price stay below. If basically we can check here when the first cycle actually started to go a little bit more exponential, like here. In fact, that was even after the end of the year. So the way to think about this is that there is some kind of box, right? A box, instead of thinking about a particular line, it's like a box, maybe it has 1 or 2 months width. And so these events can be understood as a region, right? So the bull market started after the end of the year for the first cycle, while this one, the second one started early, kind of like now. See this last cycle started here. This was the first, the second, and the third one, right? It was kind of early, kind of now, and this one was almost perfectly at the end of the year. Okay, and so so it's probably better to compare the current and the last cycle, so we can zoom in. And I don't see anything different, right? So there are so many similarities. The last cycle went above the power law. It had a major correction. Same thing here. We just went slightly above the power law, and then we had a correction. Then the bull market started. Same thing. And now if we draw like a straight line through the data, it's quasi exponential, right? It was much more, look at this, it was very exponential because this was almost perfect, right? And it's kind of cool because last cycle, we had a correction, more or less. That actually was a deeper correction, where here we had a correction. It's probably by chance, we should not give too much meaning, but it shows, independently from when it happened, that consistent behavior as an exponential, in this case, right, it started in October 10, and it went all the way to more or less, right, the same time when we had this correction, November 25. And then we had a correction, and then it recovered. Seems actually the recovery was faster, also because the correction was bigger, right? But more or less, we went back to that exponential behavior. Here is much less consistent in terms of following an exponential, still going pretty fast up. The slopes kind of look the same, right? This is 53 and this is 56. So the rate that we are going up seems very similar. So we will have to see what is in the interpretation, because this fast growth was possible because at a certain point, we had this double top. We had an early top, because a growth like this will be kind of unsustainable if we went too far. For almost 1 month, we went like it was almost like 1% a day. If you extrapolate that 1% a day for one entire year, because this is where we think the top is going to be, like the end of the year next year. If we continue on that path of 1% a day, even an average, we will do 36 times more. Imagine that, right? So it will be on the order of $3 million, more than $3 million. Bitcoin will be more than $3 million in 1 year. That it's basically impossible, because it will require an amount of capital, an amount of inflow that is, it seems unrealistic, very unrealistic. So, what happened last time, we were very, very fast. There was another major correction. This was after the end of the year. In fact, it was about January 21st, major correction, went again. We reached some kind of top, and then there was a even bigger correction. Bitcoin wanted to have the top where it usually has, so the price went down, and then it was the winter, right? The Bitcoin winter, crypto winter. It's possible that we see something like this, unless there is some kind of major change. But see, this growth, this consistent growth at this particular pace, it's quite unsustainable. There is always some kind of correction when you do that too long. So that is my understanding of these things, right? Now, of course, there are the crazy maxis, I don't need, it's not even a question of being a max, it's a question of being unrealistically bullish. That is, it's fun if it is a meme, but it's not fun if you take some actions based on thinking that the market can continue, right? So you create leverage position. Maybe you can start to buy a ton of MicroStrategy with high leverage. You are taking a big risk with options by buying absurd options where probably you're going to lose. So I will be careful. So right now it does look very much like the last bull. My projection, you're probably familiar with that, for the top is about 200,000. Now this particular curve, it's kind of an idealization of what the price is supposed to do. It's mostly to create some kind of oscillation that is periodic. So what is important is where we are going to what is the top, right? So that top is supposed to be 200,000. I explained in another video how that is calculated. I always show how if I switch off the log, right, and now we are in a linear picture, and we compare we were with even the different cycles, and you cannot even see very well how it looks like with the different cycle, right? But this is where we were in terms of the last stop. We need to go all the way there, right? So it seems much more of a challenge if you draw these in a linear chart, right? The price, because basically, remember, we are going from 100,000 to 200,000 while we are moving around 2.1 trillion market cap. So it took Bitcoin to develop a 2.1 trillion market cap. And if we go to 200, that means you're adding another 2.1 trillion. But again, it took 15 years to build that market cap. Now we're going there in only 1 year, right? It's already, if you're thinking of that, you realize, whoa, actually, it's quite challenging. And if we arrive there, it will be pretty amazing. And anybody else that says crazy number like 500,000, I don't know, it looks like a fairy tale, right? It's something that, like Santa Claus, it's something that very unlikely is going to happen. People come up with stories, they feel good, but if you're serious with your Bitcoin, I don't think it should be. It's not fulfilling, at least to me, right? Once I found out that Santa Claus was not real, I didn't continue to believe in Santa Claus because it felt good. Maybe I like the mythology of Santa Claus. Maybe I can tell my child about Santa Claus because it's fun, and kind of light up their imagination or whatever. But there is a point where you understand that Santa Claus is your parents, right? And you don't go back to that, right? So same thing here, it's fun, and we can make memes and we can joke around, but I don't see the utility and the usefulness of saying we are going over there, right? This where 500,000 will be, right, over there. It's very unlikely we go there, right? That's in this period of time. We are going to go there eventually, right? But not in 1 year, not in this bull market. And I do think the regularity of a cycle, the fact that we are connected with micro trends, of liquidity, of different economical cycles, we will continue to see this behavior. It's not going to be changed. Anyway, so right now I think we are on the path to reach that. In fact, it's very healthy, this percentage growth. I mentioned about 1%. So we are kind of ahead of schedule, right? Because to reach 200,000, if you do the math and it's compounded, basically we need a 0.33% a day. So as long in average we're close or above that value, and we continue to do that for 1 year, it should not be a problem to reach 200,000. In the other end, believing that we can do 1% a day, even with the correction, right? Maybe now it's slightly smaller than that, and we can reach, $3 million in 1 year. It's like believing in Santa Claus. So I will say this, that is what the chart, it's very healthy. It's good. The correction was okay this even. It's nice. It's reassuring to compare with the last cycle, right? Because we know it was a good bull run, right? It was not crazy as the first bull run. It was not crazy as the second bull run, but it was a pretty good one. And there were corrections that are almost identical to what we had before, even bigger. So nothing to worry about, right? Also because the price is corrected itself in the other direction. So this is the picture where we are now. We can look at a couple of the things like liquidity. We can compare with MicroStrategy. I'm going to look at questions to see if there is any question. Click here. Okay. Thank you, Xavier. He's saying excellent work. I think the power law will break at some point. I'm surprised. Yes, so there is this question, right? It comes many times. Let's see. Hopefully you can see it. I'm still learning how to use these. Let me see. Show. Okay. I think the power law will break at some point in terms of price. USD loses value exponentially. So at some point it outruns the model. Listen, we need at a certain point, you see, because usually when I do these discussions and trying to write an entire article, right, and I'm writing even a book, because I'm not just saying a couple of things, I'm trying to explain my thought and my calculations in a very consistent way. Inflation is already included here in the sense that when I say the price of Bitcoin will be such and such in 10 years, right, for example, it means it's so if we say it's going to be $1 million in 10 years from now, that is the $1 million of whatever the price will be there, right? So basically, it's whatever you're going to see on the exchange, because this is what we have, this is what we play with. It's what is called the observable. We are establishing a relationship between the current value of Bitcoin with time. So if I say $1 million in 2024 and 34, it will be whatever $1 million is worth at time. Now you can do on the side your calculation of what that $1 million corresponds today. Does it correspond to 800,000? Does it corresponds to 700,000? It's up to you, because there are different models of inflation. There are different impact of inflation on different things. Are you talking about the cost of a house? Are you talking about food? What are you talking about in this country or this other country? So I leave to you. We can do it together, do this calculation, but it's already included in that sense. Now, if inflation goes much faster than what is kind of included implicitly or indirectly, basically the case of Argentina, other things like that, I don't understand what people think that how that could be good, right? Because many times they almost feels to me it's not just a problem, they actually want it, because they think, I think that is what is meant. They think that you see this spike in the price, how Bitcoin relatively to this currency that is hyperinflating, and that means that your Bitcoin is more valuable. It's actually the opposite. At least at the minimum, nothing changes, because now you are evaluating Bitcoin relatively to something that is moving exponentially, right? But it doesn't give us additional value, to Bitcoin. It makes it worse, because it's, people will not buy Bitcoin. They will be worried about other things. They will be worried about food and water, etc. And Bitcoin will be the last of their worries. It's not that everybody starts to buy more Bitcoin and make Bitcoin go up even more in value. It's not of a refuge, because we don't have a system where people trade between each other with Bitcoin. It's more like a store of value. As to be a store of value, the underlying corresponding address. I know we have all this philosophy that it doesn't matter. We are trying to go away from the USD. In a way we are doing, but we are still linked with that system. We are not yet there, because this is the story of how we go there. Okay, we are not there yet. And so thinking that we are dissociated with USD, and if USD or euro gets hyperinflated, that is a good thing for Bitcoin, is a very wrong way of thinking about that. So you want to hope for a relatively small inflation, because anyway the debt will increase. It's not that all of a sudden that means people will abandon Bitcoin because it's not a good value proposition. It's good because we are still beating all the different currencies, right? We are gaining value relatively to these currencies, but you want them relatively stable, okay? And so saying that it breaks the power law, it's nonsense, because if it goes hyperinflationary, first of all, I really doubt that it will happen with country like United States. It will happen with country like the major European countries, because the system is too big, too much interconnected, and they will do all kinds of things to stop that. We're not talking about a small country with a small economy somewhere in the third world like Argentina. So first of all, it's not going to happen. And second, if it happens, Bitcoin will be our last worry. All these ideas that people have about the value of Bitcoin exploding because all of a sudden the dollar became hyperinflationary are distortion. I already wrote an article on that. I'm going to write another one that is titled something like "The End of a World is Not Bullish for Bitcoin." Okay, where actually I discuss all these doom scenario that some people even almost desire. Right, I heard some serious people in the Bitcoin world saying, "Oh, this is like ripping the Band-Aid." It's a stupid idea, very stupid idea, and it doesn't matter who's telling us this. Okay, and we can discuss it, but yeah, I don't think so. I think that we will see relatively consistent inflations. We want that because we want Bitcoin to be more than this inflation. That is the entire point, right? We want to see Bitcoin growing at a faster pace than inflation. If inflation catches up, Bitcoin fails. I don't know how to explain it, better than this. We are reason why it's a good investment because it beats inflation. If inflation overcomes Bitcoin, then it's not a good investment. So I don't understand the logic of that. Anyway, so we can have another talk where we focus on that, and we can go back and forth. You will read my article, but that is my current thinking about that. Now, some people say, well, it doesn't matter if it is good or bad, it can happen. I don't think so. There are strong reasons why I think United States will not go hyperinflationary. The US dollar will not go hyperinflationary. Too much connected of a system. People will do all kinds of things. Okay, I think the power. So Zacchi, I don't know if I pronounce correctly. I think for the power law to truly break, will need to be an easy of access scenario, the point anyone can buy with their Apple Wallet. Yeah, I don't know what that means. I think if there is that kind of access where everything becomes easier because we are going towards that direction, right? Right now, in theory, you could do that. Like, for example, you can have, at least in the United States, I don't know where you're from, Zachi. I finally orange peeled my girlfriend, and I told her the way I did it. I told her to get this app called Cash App, and I even sent her some like a gift. I send her a little bit of a Bitcoin, of a dollar, because you can send people dollars. You can send also Bitcoin through Cash App, but I send it dollar because I wanted her to buy Bitcoin herself. And so I showed her how to do it. And it took, like, she was super surprised that it was that easy. It's like a button. You click a button and you get Bitcoin. And everybody can download that app. You can, in few minutes, you can connect it with your bank. It's completely different to what we needed to do. I remember, just a second, I'm going to drink some water. I remember when Mongox came up, I had some coins there. I had to go all through all kind of loops, like hoops. Sorry, I had to send my be like a electrical bill. They wanted an electrical bill. You had to send an electrical bill or something else to show that you live in a particular place. It was a long procedure, and I don't remember even if you could do it by email or if you had to actually physically send it there. It looked like primitive times, right? Today it's super easy. It's something else, but it's difficult to. I mean, I am in Bitcoin. She saw me um, all these years of a price change, and she was involved with me. And it took her all this time to change her mind because she has certain political views, or maybe she associates Bitcoin with certain things. Of course, she's tolerant of my interest, like many times when people are together. And finally, I was able to convince her that it's a really something useful, important, and almost every day, she tells me, "Oh, my wallet, my account went up by this and this other." Now, finally, she gets interested, even if it is just from this particular point of view. Of course, she knows my theory or my philosophical understanding of Bitcoin, but no, it takes time. It takes time to orange peel people because it's not just an investment. It's like a worldview, and people take time to change their worldview. And so, but it's happening, and it's happening at this particular pace. And this is what the power law is all about. We are doing exactly so. The fact that it is a scale invariant adoption, different from the S curve, I love it because what it says, that because we know, right, if you follow my work, at a certain point we can make actually an indicator about that. We can show the on-chain parameters, show how addresses are growing like a power law. The addresses are growing like a power law. I need to make that indicator so you can see it. And then that growth is cube to the cube. And it's a straight line, right, in a log-log graph. You know what that means? It means that there is nothing special at any particular point. It's very different from the S curve, right? And some people say, technology follow S curve. That is true, but Bitcoin, it's a social network. It's a technology, sure, but it behaves like a social network, and social networks grow with power law. That means there is no a characteristic time. There is, like with the S curve, at a certain point you reach this middle point where that corresponds to about 50% of the total possible number of users having adopted that technology. You go very fast just before reaching that point. That is the fastest time when you have very, very rapid adoption. It goes almost straight, right, in a linear graph. And then it kind of saturates, right? It starts to slow down and it saturates. We don't see that with Bitcoin. It's basically doing exactly the same thing that we have done from the beginning. It's growing with the same type of process, this cube of time. So there is no point where you can say, hey, there is an acceleration, etc. No. If anything, actually, because power laws, they grow like it's very similar process of growth with exponentials, where basically you take the current state, so the number of Bitcoiners right now, you multiply by 3 because of the power of 3. That is how many people we are going to get tomorrow, right? Tomorrow we are going to get how many of us there are right now, whatever that number is. Let's say we are 10 million people in the world or whatever. You multiply I think the right number is closer to 100 million, right? 100 million people all over the world. You multiply by 3, and if you do that, right, that will be the change. Well, that will be an exponential, but you have to divide by the age of a system, in this case, the number of days from when Bitcoin was invented. So it becomes less and less efficient with time. And that seems a negative thing, but it's not a bug, it's a feature. It allows for the system to have enough breathing room to grow consistently over time. And this is why it can go from being an asset that was only few cents to hundreds of thousands or even millions. You will not be able to do that with an exponential. So this is why it's actually doing this power law growth that is not intuitive, but it's the right thing for Bitcoin. It's how it's going to be the world monetary system. Okay, yeah, thank you. This is fun and down. I will try to make this Friday events a little bit more concrete, so you can see how all this knowledge applies to the current state. Okay, and then we can have maybe theoretical ones, where we go a little bit deeper in other times. This one is more focused on the market itself. Okay, let's go to this other question. Price can reach 200K until end of 24. It makes sense. Thanks. The end of 24? We're talking about the end of 25. And now 280K, so our calculation is 200, but 280 is not out of the question, okay? So it's possible that give it, and we did some simulations, even by chance, right? You always have some additional volatility where the price can continue to go up, and there is a range, like a window, right? That window, it's anything between 150 to 280 comes. You can do simulations of this, like what is called Monte Carlo simulation. And some of the simulation do allow for a 280. But if you do the simulation a million times, you will get few hundred of this simulation over a million simulation that reach that value. That is how unlikely that value is. It's not impossible, but relatively unlikely. Now, all that also show when you do this simulation, this Monte Carlo simulation, that you basically you will have to wait thousands of years before it arrives. You will have to do billions of simulation before you have one that goes to 500. Is it even possible? Almost impossible, given what we know right now. But it's going to be the end of next year. And this question says from James Sang. I will try to pronounce your name, but I'm sorry. Even after living 30 years in the United States, sometimes I have problems pronouncing these kind of names. James Sang, right? Does your power law price prediction already included in the dollar depreciation? Yeah, in the sense of what I described before, right? Because the idea is this: I'm taking what I'm observing. What am I observing? I'm observing the price at any given time. That is the only thing we know, right? In physics, we call the observable. It's this quantity that is very precise, right? You can go to the archive and say, what was the price at this particular time? That is the price. And the prediction needs to be consistent. So if I say a million, it's going to be a million as you're going to read. Imagine you are opening TradingView 10 years from now and you see $1 million. And my prediction is $1 million. That is what is meant. Now, of course, the $1 million of 10 years from now is not going to be the same $1 million of today. But it makes sense, right? It will be the $1 million of that time. So you can correct it and say, well, it will be the same as owning 800,000, right? You can do that correction yourself. Just add some inflation that you think is reasonable, because otherwise we end up making a model of a model, right? And this is why I don't like it. I'd rather stay consistent with this picture. I know some people find it frustrating. Thank you, Johnny, for your donation. That will be very cool. This is very cool. When do you think we will hit 200K? it's possible that we do it if you have, in particular, if you have a double top. We do it even by April, if because last time we had a double top, it was in April, and then it will be a correction when it goes up again. But unless that happens, then it's November of the next year. And again, we could go higher than that, but not too high. High, what is good? Do power law ever shift into new powerful power laws? This is a question. It could be. Usually these power laws are very consistent, right? And there is a reasons, because the mechanism behind the power laws are consistent, are these iteration processes. So unless there is some very, some kind of paradigm shift, right? For example, there is this famous law that is called the Kleber's law. And the Kleber's law talks about the metabolism in animals, right? It's the relationship between how much energy they consume versus their size. And you can see there is a power law that is true for the mammals. And then if you go to animals with cold blood, like insect and lizards, reptiles, amphibious animals, you see the same power law. By the way, the slope is the same, but the y-intercept is lower. So it's almost like there was some kind of shift. That shift is the warm blood of mammals. So for a given size, we consume more energy, we burn more calories, but we get an advantage out of it. So, but the slope more powerful will mean that the slope is steeper. So you do see sometimes things like that, but it needs to be some kind of radical change that changes how things operate. Now, the ETFs or sailors are not. It's only a matter. So one other example, let me give you, and you can read, there is a lot of literature, because the beauty of a power law is not just a model, it's an entire philosophy, it's an entire framework to understand this phenomenon. One of the phenomena that is very much linked to power laws is what is called phase transition. So, for example, when water becomes ice, you see all these little structures that are created, like that are basically that is ice. But ice doesn't happen only at one scale. There are, at all the different scales, something is happening. There are little chunks of ice that are created almost at a molecular level. Then there are a little bit bigger chunks, like little kind of microscopic chunk of ice. Then there are bigger chunk of ice. There are all these things that are happening at all the scales. And so you can almost think about these, it's an analogy, it's not one-to-one, with all the different entities that operate with Bitcoin. There are individual investors, maybe there are group of people, like maybe some retirement fund or some investment clubs, and then there are the banks, and then there are the ETFs, and then there is Celo, maybe there are nations. There are all these different entities working at different scales, and they all contribute in the same. They all create the same phenomena. And even show that mathematically, where I look at the growth of different wallets with different cutoffs, and you can show that individually they behave differently. Like the big whales have a big impact, but there are fewer of them. And so when you look at, while the shrimp has a little impact on the market, but there are a lot of us, right? A lot of small investors. And the total effect is the same. You can even show it from an empirical point of view and mathematical point of view. So I don't think the ETFs represent a change like that. It's simply another big whale that is part of this scaling process. I know it's not super intuitive, but that seems the case. One demonstration of that is, look at this, what happened. The ETF came in, they had a big impact on the price, right? Because mostly it's not just how big they are, but also how fast they move, right? It's like a whale that is splashing around. It's going to make a lot of water moving around. So it was a big injection of cash. A lot of people follow also because of FOMO. But notice what happened. When we arrived to a power law, he wanted to correct. and we went through many months of correction, right? From all the way from March to and kind of beginning of September was this big correction. That shows that they are not the type of phenomena that is going to change the power law. It's just temporarily they can, but then overall they don't. So that is the idea behind. Now, is it true? Will it continue to be like that? We will see. But the theory behind it and the data supports what I'm saying. Okay. And then there is this question, very long. Before the Fourier cycle theory requires ignoring the one bubble as irrelevant, pre-halving price. You factor in between COVID, you get log periodic cycle instead of Fourier cycle. Well, if you take the first bubble and then the second and the third, you could fit a log periodic. Log periodic means it takes longer and longer, actually, for the bubbles to happen. And in fact, that was my understanding of a bubble before we had the last bubble. I was under, because that is the only data we had, I didn't have any reason to exclude the first bubble. The first bubble is the bubble that happened before the halving, right? And in fact, I even had a discussion with Plan B on this very precise topic. And I was telling him, they look log periodic. You're saying they are periodic, because he was like one of the first people to claim that the bubble were associated with the halvings. And I was not convinced about that argument. You see, when people say that I am against Plan B, that it's not personal. It's about ideas. And my idea was, if you take the first three bubbles, because the data look like that, and I mean, including this one, including the one that happened before the halving, it looks like it takes longer and longer. So you could make a model, a log periodic model of these three bubbles. And then we had the fourth bubble, right? And it looked, third bubble if you're excluding the first one. And now the case for periodicity, because look at this, right? How well they align. And this doesn't seem to be aligned to anything, right? It's much stronger. It doesn't look like the log periodicity is there. And so it's much easier to throw away, and people will say, well, but you're throwing away a bubble. Well, it's okay to throw away an outlier, also because we know what is different with this bubble relatively to the other one. It's not by chance that this is before the halving. So that doesn't mean that the bubble are created by shock supply, supply shock. It's other mechanism. There is no supply shock, but the halving still brings a lot of changes. It brings updating of a infrastructure. I have videos where I explain all of that, how come the halving matters, but it's not about supply or supply shocks. It's not about scarcity. But that is one of the good contribution of Plan B, by pointing out that the cycles are periodic and they happen for every 4 years. I change because this is how scientists do. When you have evidence that point to something different from what you believed before, it's not like you're changing the goalpost. This is how science doesn't work like that. You're changing your understanding, because this is what happens. This is how science evolves, right? When Einstein came about and say, listen, Newton theory, it's an approximation of the truth. The truth is this. And in a certain sense, Newton is still right, but it's an approximation of this new idea or new understanding of gravity. You have to be a good scientist and say, yeah, you're right. When you have all the evidence, when there is not just the theory, but all the experimental evidence that supports relativity. And we have a ton of that evidence. So same thing, right? This is how science evolves. Right now, it looks like these bubbles are very regular. They happen every 4 years. They are periodic and not log periodic. And this is one more like an anomaly where something different happened there. And we need to study why was it different, right? Because this is the other thing that we do as a scientist. We want to understand. We know that happened before the halving, but why? What was going on there? Why it happened there? Why? What was driving it? And I didn't have yet the time. One day I want to study better, get more data, trying to figure out why it happened before the other bubbles. But right now I'm treating it. You see, I don't even model it. This is why I don't have this curve going through here, because it's not part of a model. Now there is this person called Leo, and he created a model that is pretty cool model. I pushed back a little bit initially. There are a couple of things I don't like. It's a little bit too much ad hoc, but he changes the one parameter. So he adds one parameter. The problem with adding more and more parameter, there is this famous scientist called von Neumann, and he was making fun of one of my idol, that is Enrico Fermi, that is a Nobel Prize for physics. Fermi was trying to describe this phenomena in physics, and he had this model that had four parameters, I think. And then a colleague of him, von Neumann, I think this is how you pronounce his name, came about and said, well, with 4 parameters, I can fit an elephant, and with 5, I can make it move its trunk. Basically, he was trying to say, by the time you add all these parameters, you can almost recover the behavior of anything, right? Theoretically, it's even true. There is this thing called the Taylor expansion, where you add more and more component, and then theoretically you can reproduce absolutely anything, even all these little changes here. Now, that model will not be predictive, because you're modeling the noise and not the signal. So it's always a compromise. So the beauty of a power law is that it has basically one main parameter, that is the slope. The y-intercept is less important. So at most 2, maybe really 1. And my full model, when I do, when I start to add things on top of a power law, like basically this is also an equation. This curve here, the purple line, it's an equation. I can write down an equation, but I need a little bit more parameters, because I need to add a period of a waves. I need to add the phase of a wave, so where it happens. There is also the decay. They tell us we have a certain deviation. I need to add the decay of a peak. So you see all these parameters, and this is why more and more a parameter you're adding, you risk that your model is just fitting the existing data, and it loses predictive power. This is why I try to keep it as simple as possible. By the time you're adding another parameter to change a little bit the length of these periods, like Leo does, and it's amazing. I didn't even believe it in the beginning, but he does add this little parameter, and all of a sudden he can add this new bubble. This is a first bubble. It actually works. And now you have a model that is very similar. One of the consequences is that the peak now for the last cycle is not here, but here. So he says, oh, this was the real cycle, the top. This was not the top. And so we had a little bit of a controversy where he say, look, I much rather focus on this because it's simpler. I'm going to make this like a early top, right? So you change a little bit the interpretation. Now, the only way to settle this argument will be to have another bubble. When we have another bubble and we see how it behaves, then, one camp will be stronger than the other, right? Like, for example, we already know that plan B S2F is horrible. It doesn't, because there are all kinds of mathematical mistakes, etc. But many people are not convinced because they don't understand my explanations based on math. That S2F doesn't work. It's a bad model. But by the time, we don't reach 500 and we are going to be more close to 200, I hope, because it's such a bad model, many people will abandon it. I think what will happen is that he will find an excuse, fix the model, and be around next cycle. He will still be around pushing S to F. I think this is what will happen. But hopefully many people will see that it doesn't work. This is how many times you do things in science. There are, that is actually one of the problems of modern physics, where we talk about things that we are not able to test because we are in this crazy realm, where the physics that they describe is so detached from the ability that we have to test. Like they talk about, the first very, very small quantity of time after the Big Bang, or they are talking about what happened inside the Big Bang, a black hole, places that we cannot really test at the moment. Maybe one day we will have some technology to do that, but this is why there are literally hundreds of papers that are published, and one theory says this, the other theory says that, and they are published because we are coherent, at least internally, but then there is no way of showing, this model works better than this other. It's one of the things, when you hear people say physics is in crisis, at least this type of physics. Of course, there is much more practical physics where people apply to materials, or maybe things we can observe, like stars and other things like that. And it still works fantastic, but, this very far away physics, we kind of lost touch a little bit. But you resolve competing theory, and it's fine to have competing theories. Like I like, for example, Leo model. It's so similar to mine. It uses the power law. It believes in the cycle. It's just a minor difference where, if he is right and we have a second, we have an early top, and then, in that case, should we consider this a real top and accept his model and say that maybe, we will have more information. Simply, we will have more information. Then we can do an update, and will give us more insight on how Bitcoin behaves. Right now, I'm sticking with this simpler version. So yeah, this is how I answer your question. But I want the simplest possible understanding of the bubbles, and this picture I'm giving seems too coherent to be abandoned, and then, but as we get more information, then we can go back to the drawing table and see, okay, this looks better as a model. Okay. All right. And then there is this question. Yes, losing value exponentially doesn't mean we have hyperinflation, even if we steal 2% every year at some point, the exponential growth around the power law. Well, okay. And people have done calculations for that, and it's going to be something like 100 years or something like that. So in 100 years, yes. But the entire idea of this model is that in 20 years from now, if we continue on the power law, Bitcoin will have the value of entire economy on Earth, okay, in terms of market cap, and Bitcoin will be on the order of $10 million or more. And I think at that time, 20 years from now, this is when hyper-Bitcoinization will happen. It's an hypothesis. I'm just thinking that the value of Bitcoin will be so big, it will be on the order of basically the entire wealth on Earth, that nation will have to respond and will have to do something, something dramatic. And that something dramatic will be probably like pegging the dollar to Bitcoin, and we will have a Bitcoin standard, right? Bitcoin will become a monetary standard of the world. And at that point, the entire Bitcoin power law will end, right? So you have only other 20 years of me blabbing around and rambling and listening to my videos. You're going to stick with me for the next 20 years, okay? After that, we're going to have no power law. Maybe I will still ramble on something else, but that is the idea. Yes, it will take hundreds, 100 years before inflation. And this is what you want, because the entire point of Bitcoin is that it's beating inflation. If inflation becomes so big that overcomes Bitcoin, then Bitcoin is useless, right? At least as a store of value. So it's not going to happen soon. And we will have hyper Bitcoinization, and hopefully that stop inflation. So I don't know how that world looks like. One day, when I write my book, I'm already thinking about a chapter that describes this future world of hyper Bitcoinization, but it will be so much speculation. We don't have a framework to describe it. Maybe we can go back and look at how, when the Roman Empire or other empires peg their coins, right, to gold or something like that, but it will be still different from that. So we can speculate, but awful is good. Awful is a good word, and all the problems that we have are not going to be there. But the story of the power law is how we went there, right? And so I think we don't have to worry about inflation in that way. Okay, then there is Xavier. I understand okay, let me show the question. I understand your point about how you don't think the PL can break, almost unlikely, but what about the bubble? Yeah, so the idea behind the bubble, at least the data that we have, right? Because the entire philosophy that I'm trying to follow is that I'm not going to try to invent things. I'm not going to imagine things. I'm not going to use my emotions. I only want to focus on what the data tell us. The data tell us that these deviations from the trend are going down. They decrease in time. And I can show you another indicator that shows this very clearly. So if we go here, okay, so this indicator here, first let me show you if I take off the log. Okay, so if I take off the log, I will tell you in a moment what this yellow line represents. But what you're seeing here, these are deviation from the trend. So basically, I subtract the trend, that is the power law, and what is left are the bubbles, right? And so this shows how big the bubble has. The precise calculation that is done here is price minus trend divided by trend. And then you multiply by 100. And you see how big the first one was when it went down. This went down, went down. Now, because there is a pattern there, the most logical thing to do is to assume that this continues, right? So it was not China, it was not this, it was not that, why we went down last time. It's a process. It seems part of how Bitcoin works, okay? And if you take the log, see, it'll start to look like that. Actually, there are like separate regions, right? When we stay below the power law and when we go above the power law, you can identify this region. Here went a little bit, but in general, you can think this entire region. See how regular they are? It's really amazing. Now, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see this way where this yellow line comes into place. You can connect the tops with a straight line. Now, it's not perfect, right? It's not perfect. And in this case, I'm choosing the second one to be my top. And this one, kind of. Now, you can do this in a more precise mathematical fashion using regression, but I wanted to give you an intuitive understanding of this. See, I'm connecting kind of close where the top is, right? Close enough. And I even include the first one. So you see there is a very precise downtrend. And remember, when we have a straight line in a log linear chart, like the log of a y, we are talking about an exponential. So this one looks like a straight line, but actually goes down very, very quickly. It's an exponential. And you can measure the slope of this exponential and then project it to the future and predict how big the next bubble is. In fact, visually, you can even say, okay, let me continue this line. You can look at the date, right, that we are saying is going to be at the end of the year, next year. So you see here, kind of here. And then I go and I see what is the value, right? This will be a kind of a very rough way, intuitive way of doing it instead of doing the precise calculation that you can do. But you see, roughly, it's about 80%, right? 83%. So the deviation, and here these deviations are measured from the trend. So you see, I go here, I look what the value of the trend was. It's going to be at that time of the year. It's about 135, something like that. And then you can take 135 and add 80%. That's how we get the 200,000. It's basically 80%. It's not quite 2. It's 80% in addition to 135. So the trend value. And so while, if you go all the way to the first bubble, that deviation was 1,500 times, right? 15 times bigger than the trend. And it went down, right? Started to go down. Last bubble, we were more like 200%, right? So 3 times more than the trend. And it seems to go down and seems to be, again, I don't want to ignore anything I see from Bitcoin. If there is a trend like that is surprising, because it's the part where you will have thought that, it's driven by FOMO, it's driven by human psychology. Yes, maybe it goes down because it's more difficult to move, $1 trillion of asset than few $1 million, when Bitcoin was just $1, right? The market cap was $21 million. Then, moving trillions of dollars, so you will expect maybe the bubble go down. Why in this very, very precise, regular fashion, where you can actually even write an equation for that, right? When they say, human behavior is not described by mathematics. In Bitcoin, everything is, even this decay. What is going on? Why is so regular? Why it follows this very precise pattern? I don't know. As a scientist, to me, it's very fascinating. What is going on? Can you explain it? I don't know. Right now, I don't. I go to sleep almost every night thinking about stuff like that. Say, what the heck? What is going on? Can you come up with a logical explanation for this? I don't. Right now, I don't know. Money or debt, which is the other Stefan basically is like an astrophysicist too. He has like a little model. He thinks it's some kind of diffusion. I need to understand better what he's trying to describe. Maybe he's into something. So maybe there is a way of describing what is going on here, but it's another regularity, right? Because there is the experimental part of doing science and there is the theoretical part. Many times, when they discover the other power law, the motion of a planet, that is a power law, it's called the Kepler's law, they went 100 years without knowing what is going on, and people were using it to do calculation, predict eclipses, etc. They were using it without understanding that it was due to the law of gravity. Then Newton came about, and it was able to explain why we observe this power law from first principle. That was, we have this thing called the law of gravity, but that actually helped him to derive the law of gravity. Kepler helped him to understand that there was some kind of regularity in the behavior of the planets. Same thing here. We need somebody coming up and say, hey, this is what is going on. Now, the only problem we have, if we had thousands of data points, right, then we could be a little bit more certain that this pattern will continue. The problem is we have only 4 data points. And sometimes, as regular and as precise this behavior is, if you only have 4 data points, it could be still due to chance, right? Now, by the time we have a 5th data point and the next cycle really does what we are saying we are doing, that basically is going to end up there, right? The peak is going to be there. So if it is there, we will have more confidence. Whoa, will be really, it will quiet down a lot of people. Will say, this decay is not real. It will be really amazing, right? That now we have 5 bubbles and they are following this behavior. Again, in the absence of some evidence that this is not behaving in this way, it's not part of a theory. It's not part of a power law theory. It's an add-on, right? It's like I'm describing gravity, and then you're telling me, well, but you can ignore air friction, and then I say, well, initially I can, but you're right. If I want really to describe what is going on, I need to add air friction. But air friction is not part of the theory of gravity. It's just something you need to add to describe a complexity of reality, right? We are not on the moon where there is no air, right? If we were there, we could completely ignore friction. So we're adding these just to make the model more complete, but it's not part of the theory. If that is broken, then it means that this idea that there was this regularity was just an illusion, that even if it seems like a very convincing illusion, sometimes illusion can be like that, right? But this right now seems to be too regular, too precise, not to be an illusion. So also because how could you calculate this quantity here unless you had something like this? I don't know of any other strong argument based on real science. Everything else that I heard, it's kind of like imagination, right? Even S2F, even if you say S2F is okay, doesn't have all this problem, I hope you realize that S2F doesn't make a prediction of the top, it makes a prediction of the middle. This is the other thing that many people don't understand. S2F doesn't predict 500,000 top, it predicts 500,000 average. So if 500,000 is the average, I would like to ask Plan B, what is the top? Do you have an idea what the top is? It's 2 times bigger than that. Why is 2 times? He will not be able to tell you because there is no way actually to calculate the top in his method. While this, it's consistent. It has at least some meat, It's the only thing we have, and so it's better than nothing, But you see, it's consistent. But it's not a core component of the power law, okay? So this component is the weakest one, and it could be broken. We need to get you started on Noster. Okay, I will try. I like the idea in principle. I just worry that there is not much activity, but we can try there. I don't know. Is it very active? There are a lot of people. Is it efficient? Okay. If you took your girlfriend years to be, if you took your girlfriend years to be orange peel, imagine how long it will take for corporation and nations and state. Right, exactly, right? It takes time. And we do our job, we go and orange peel people, and that is part of, feeling Bitcoin is bigger than us. That is part of the attraction, right? That we are dedicated to a cause besides being wealthier. We want other people to be wealthier. But, it's also a feature in the sense that it allows Bitcoin the space for regulations to pass by, for the network to become stronger, right? Because it takes time for the infrastructure to grow. It's a feature. It's good. So try to look beyond your selfish desire of becoming millionaire tomorrow and look at the long-term growth. That there is a reason why there is this article that sometime I show that you can read. It's really cool. In fact, let me give you the link for that. I will put it in the chat. It's a really cool article, and it's not difficult to read. And there is also a more popular, like a simplified version of this article. It's an article on the growth of tooth shells, thorns, all this. I mean, people add hints of this, but recently they came up with a very, very consistent, very well-done study where they show, right? So this article here, it's really cool. And the title of this article is A Universal Power Law for Modeling the Growth of Teeth, Claws, Horns, Thorns, Beaks, Shells. It's really cool because we even show, the shape of a tooth. It's not just how fast they grow, but even the shape of many different weird teeth, like, for example, the shark, right, of a dinosaur, wild dinosaur. They even say we could even imagine creatures like dragons, right? Because it gives you all the possible, like the space of all the possible realistic shapes. And so you could make, if you were doing CGI, you could make a dragon that has a realistic tooth, given its size or whatever. So you could make really weird teeth, but there are still things that nature will be able to create instead of being completely absurd. It's a really fantastic article. You can read it. And it's all full of power laws. There are power laws all over the place in this article because this is what we found out. All these structures grow like power laws, right? And it's really cool that Bitcoin, it's like this natural phenomena, right? It's not a normal asset. And there is a reason why nature chosen power laws versus anything else. Because if I grow a tooth, I want to make sure I have enough calcium. It takes resources, right, to create these structures. You have to use calcium, the energy to create it. It's a bunch of resources that are dedicated to these structures. And as the animal grows, you want to make sure it doesn't run out of the resources, right? So you want to do it in a gradual way that allows for the animal to go back to go to the next scale. Growing a small little elephant task is not the same thing than growing a huge, enormous task. So it's going to slow down. That process is going to slow down. This is why they are so ubiquitous and they are all over the place, because power laws, it's a favorite form of growth for nature. And there are reasons. There are very precise reasons. So read this article when you have time. When you have time. Okay. All right. So maybe we can spend a couple of minutes. We are close to 1 hour now, or a little bit longer. And we look at the other indicators. So there are a couple of things I want to show you. The first one is we want to talk about liquidity, right? Because we have liquidity in our mind often. Oh, by the way, see how this indicator is kind of cool because it flashes red when we start the bull run, and it continues to be red all the time during the bull run until actually we cross back the power law when we go down during the bear market, right? So it's kind of cool. They started to flash red, right? It's the beginning of the bull market. Also, this indicator, see, starts here at the cusp is where we think that usually the bull run starts. We are a little anticipating, but the timing, the shape, everything looks like good. The only thing that doesn't look good is this, because in all the previous bull runs, we all have, so this, to make it short, I made a model, and this is where we have to take this model a little bit more carefully than the other ones, because with the power law, it's a simple equation. It's beautiful. There are not many parameters. It's scale invariant. I was looking for something like that between liquidity and Bitcoin price, but there is not. There is a nice relationship because you can see that the two move very close to each other, but Bitcoin is a multiplier of liquidity. So it's not a linear relationship. The liquidity is less impactful than it was in the beginning. The beginning, Bitcoin was exploding relatively to the liquidity, but there is a relationship, and you can use that relationship to make a model. And this purple one is basically, you can think of it as the fair value of Bitcoin based on liquidity alone, based on the typical relationship between, and liquidity, there is no like a universal definition of what liquidity have. Some financial firms have even their own proprietary model. There is this famous liquidity expert called Howell. We had even an interview with him, and he has his own proprietary model. By the way, that model is supposed to peak sometime in the last quarter of 2005. It is really cool that his liquidity model and Bitcoin peak at the same time. But using some normal definition of liquidity, so basically I use kind of like this list. I can show you. in a second. It's a long list of inputs. Basically, almost everything I could find on TradingView that is kind of macro parameter, right? So different banks from the world, all the M2s of the big countries, even other M2 country, like smaller country like Brazil and so on. So I added as much as possible to create some kind of a model of global liquidity. And then I look at the relationship with Bitcoin, and I made this purple model that is, it's like what I say you should not do, that is adding a bunch of parameters, right? But again, it's better than nothing, right? But every time you have something better than nothing, but it's not amazing, you have to be honest and tell people. This is what I'm trying to do. It's something that I will take with a grain of salt in terms of a relationship with Bitcoin, but it's still telling us if liquidity is going up, down, that should be still correct. And you see, it was going down while Bitcoin was going up. And I consider it a source of worry, because they say, look, maybe the ETFs, sailors are great. They're pushing the price up. They're trying to change the mind of traditional finance. But by itself, I'm not sure will be enough to bring us to 200K. But, I don't know. We could quantify it, right? I told you before that we need $200 million every single day. I don't know, between Sailor and BTF, they do have that kind of financial power, between year and 1 year, every single day, right? That is an average, 200 million inflow. And it's actually growing because, if the price grows, that is actually to stay on the power law, not to actually go. In fact, we can recalculate this. I should do that. I should recalculate. I think I did it. But I will tell you. I will tell you more next time. But I think I remember I was doing it while I was not sleeping. I was doing it in my head, but I need to redo it. I think it's on the order more like, it makes sense, because we're going 3 times to reach 200,000. We need to do 3 times of what we are doing if we stay on the power law, right? Right now, on the power law, we do 0.1% a day, basically. To reach 200,000, we need to do 0.33% every day. So more than 3 times what we do to stay on the power law. That means that if you take $200 million every day of inflow to stay on the power law, we need 600 million every day to go and reach $200,000. Do you understand? Think about how much more we need to reach 500. It's crazy. The question is, do Sailor and ETF and all his friends enough, right? Or do we need M2? We need the traditional global liquidity to join in. And I see a little bit of turning around there. Let's see, maybe it starts to turn around. Let's see. But in general, it's a little bit worried, right? I will not call off the bull market because of that, but it's what is different, because you see here, for example, this was before the last bull. The purple line was above a white line. That means there was an excess of liquidity. You look for patterns like that. Are certain patterns that we can recognize and they repeat, and maybe that is a kind of guideline, right? So also before this bubble, there was excess liquidity. Before this bubble, the only one, again, showing that it was some kind of an exception, was this one. But, Bitcoin went from less than $1 all the way to $30. So you didn't need global liquidity to move this thing, right? The market was not that big, right? So it's much easier to do it without having liquidity. Just the retailer investors, some big whales can do that. So it kind of makes sense. And also how the opposite happens when we reach the peak, right? When we reach the peak, you have a switch. You have a switch from having a lot of liquidity to have less liquidity, because at that point is all FOMO. It's all pushed by FOMO, and the price goes crazy and then crashes, right? So it's an additional piece of information. Again, it's not part of the power law theory. It's just some additional information that right now, it means something. We need to interpret it. What does it mean that we were able to go up? Can we continue to go up without liquidity? I would just feel better to see what we saw before happening again, where actually liquidity catches up, it starts to go up very quickly, and maybe we have some excess liquidity, and then the beginning of the end for the bull market will be kind of shown here, like something like this, where there is the switching the other way around, right? So I don't know. It's interesting. It needs to be interpreted. Okay. I have another indicator that I can show you, and then maybe we can end here. This is called the force field. So what you're seeing here, these green and red lines are the slopes of the power law. So I'm calculating, so I'm basically fitting a mini power law, but instead of using the entire history of Bitcoin, I'm using 1 day. And so steeper the line, stronger is that slope, right? And it's the color coding is based on, is the slope bigger than the power law slope? This is the power law slope, or smaller. If it is bigger, then it turns green. And it's kind of a way of showing how fast the action is, how fast it's changing, the direction, right? When we turn things around, you see that kind of almost like starts like this direction of the slope starts to go flatter and flatter, and then you switch around, right? It's almost like some kind of magnetic field or something, trying to find some kind of analogy with physics. It's really cool. I like it. The only problem is that when you do fancy things like that with TradingView, it allows you only to use like 500 of these little markers. And so I cannot show what is going on here, but I have a way of switching it that I will make it optional for people, where you can move it so you can see how it behaves, for example, during the bull. But I can tell you what happens during a bull. During a bull, like this very long bull, we turn green and we never turn red until we reach the top. So it's another way of identifying the tops. And right now, it's interesting that even with the correction we had recently, it didn't turn red. So it's another good sign that maybe we are on the bull market. You see how it turned red here, because we were not on the bull market. But now the bull market started, we should be green all the way to the top. And this indicator also has is using the statistics of the power laws to make a prediction of where we are going. Based only on stats. It's, again, take it with a grain of salt. It's the best we can do, but it gives us a feeling, okay, we should continue to go up given the recent data, and maybe even roughly where, like, for example, if I look at the end of the year, if you're interested what is going to be by then, it's supposed to be, because basically will be the intersection, between January, here is January, and this blue line, that it's close to 115. So if this projection is correct, we should be around 115 by the end of the year. And this cloud represents other possible path. Farther away you are from the blue line, less likely they are, but it could be a range between all these. So we can look at what is the range. If we have one of these paths that is, very optimistic, we go very fast, could be 131 by the end of the year. If it is one of a little bit slower, we could be 102, 103. So if this is right, no matter what, by the end of the year, we go above 100,000. Okay. So let's see what happens. But it's kind of interesting indicator. Okay. We can look very quickly at MicroStrategy. This is MicroStrategy. So basically, this is a model. I'm doing it over 1 hour. Let's look at 1 day. Most of these indicators are 1 day. So the story with MicroStrategy is this, right? So I was looking for some kind of a power law, because the logic is, if MicroStrategy follows very closely Bitcoin, and so by the way, this purple line is Bitcoin, maybe not to make it confusing, we can make it a little bit more transparent so it doesn't confuse us too much. Okay, so that is the price of Bitcoin itself. Okay, so the blue line is the closing price of MicroStrategy. The orange line is, I plotted the data from when MicroStrategy adopted the Bitcoin, and at least initially, it looked like a power law between the two. Now, you have to be careful because it's only 4 years. We need many years before a power law is established. We need a big range in the y-axis over many order of magnitude, and you don't have any of that in this situation. So again, anytime my model is weak or it has problem, I will always tell you, take these with a grain of salt, right? At the same time, when I tell you the power law, it's strong and powerful, etc., I will, because it's a truth too, So I'm telling you the truth in both directions. So this, I will take it with a grain of salt. But look, it did a very good job, because you see how the blue line and the orange line, for most of these changing behavior of MicroStrategy, that is all based on investing in Bitcoin, it's very close, right? And in fact, you see how they deviate very strongly, right? The adoption of Bitcoin happened in August 2010. As you go farther and farther away, the model, because the model assumes that this marriage happened at the beginning of the Genesis block, right? Just because it's easier to do it in that way. We only use the data from August 2010. But when you go back and you say, I'm going to make a model of that, you start from the Genesis block. And of course, it doesn't work, right? Because MicroStrategy didn't have anything to do with Bitcoin at the time. But actually shows that, yeah, it works, because you will expect this decoupling, But this is how theoretically, if they started to buy Bitcoin from the beginning, this is how MicroStrategy should look like, right? We look like this, like orange line. But then after they adopted Bitcoin, the two go pretty close. And this could have been used to identify regions where MicroStrategy is less valuable, that is undervalued relatively to Bitcoin, and vice versa, right? When the blue line is below the orange, this is a good time to buy, right? And vice versa. When it is above, like here, they got quite excited, they reach a peak there. It will have been a good place where to sell, because it was strongly overvalued relatively to Bitcoin. So the usefulness of these, and by the way, this green line is supposed to be, so if you say, well, there is a power law between MicroStrategy and Bitcoin, by the way, that power law, it's like something like 1.3, right? That gives you a little bit of a leverage relatively. So if a power law for Bitcoin is 5.7, then the power law for MicroStrategy is 5.7 times 1.3. That is 7.1, something like that. And so this is what this green line represents. And here you see the support line. So you see how the support line is a very support line for the orange curve. Again, if MicroStrategy goes below that, it's a good buy, right? Instead of being a good sell. So I thought this is going to be great. We are going to have a way of identify good places where to buy MicroStrategy, good place where to sell it, maybe useful for option strategies and so on. But then first there was this like big jump that kind of decoupled the two, but the behavior was still kind of the same. So, this is almost like a case study for all these things that people say, can a power law do something else? And yeah, in this case, it jumped. Whatever reason, it jumped, like it's new territory for us. We are trying to understand, right, how these two things work with each other. And even when the model doesn't work so well anymore, you see how having a model actually helps you, because you can identify this change. You can say, well, until now it behaves like this, Now it's nothing. So it's not a useless exercise. Is even scientists sometimes learn more when things break, when it's actually they get excited because it's an opportunity to understand something new, So it's something went different with MicroStrategy. And then it went even more different because, okay, Bitcoin starts to go exponential now. They went exponential and very strong exponential. Look at these exponentials. Remember, every time there is something that looks like a straight line in a log linear chart, it's an exponential. Look at this, very, very exponential for quite extended time, right? From September 9 all the way to October, almost 2 months, right? For 2 months, it went up like nuts. And the angle, very steep angle, I don't remember, I think it was even more than 1% a day, something really crazy. And then it went even more crazy. It went, somebody was asking power laws that became even stronger power law. This is an exponential, but it becomes even a stronger exponential. The problem, like I told you many times, exponential are not sustainable. You can go exponential up to a point and then things will crash. And, MicroStrategy didn't crash. It's a correction, whatever you call it, but a pretty strong correction. You can almost predict it, okay? And notice also what happened. It's part of some of the work I'm doing right now. There is this physicist that studied, maybe we don't see them very well with the day. Let's try to do something smaller, like let's try 4 hours, okay? So supposedly, sometimes they are covered by noise, but just before a big correction, what you see in the data, you start to see faster and faster oscillations. Sometimes you can see with your naked eye, other time you have to do some sophisticated calculation, but you can kind of fit, like you will see if we took out the trend, that probably I should do, you start to see this oscillation, like people start to go crazy, like they buy and sell very quickly, all kind of things are happening. And so you see the price fluctuating, and that is log periodic. So basically the time in between these mini bubbles became smaller, and then it's so fast that you're saying something needs to give, and you can almost predict when the crash is going to happen. And so I made some posts today. It's called, this method was developed by this physicist called low periodic power laws, because just before the crash we go from exponential and it becomes a power law, because power laws are associated with this phase transition. It's almost like we go from water to ice or something like that. And he has done a lot, and not just him, but a lot of people. There are hundreds of papers on this topic. And I have a code, and I'm going to run it every day. And if there is I did it on Bitcoin, and it did detect these several days ahead, because the cool thing is predictive. It did detect the little, let's call it mini crash, right? It did detect, and usually what you see is a spike in this quantity. Say, whoa, something is happening here. And it also detect the bottom. So something that I will do as a service, and I will put it on my X, the people in the Discord, we will have a channel where you can find it. I will try to do it every day. I will do it both for Bitcoin and MicroStrategy. And we can see, let's see if it works. I never tried it I read a lot of literature. I never tried it on a regular basis, where we, like almost like an observatory, right? We are going to plot it every day. I don't think we need a time scale that is shorter than, we can try, but I don't think we need shorter than a day. And we can pause, nothing happens, then, oh, there is a spike, let's do something about it. Oh, let's see, first of all, let's see if it is regular enough, right? We want to be honest. And then if we have enough stats, say, oh, this seems very consistent. It could be something useful to have, another tool that we have. So I will create this morning. It's too complicated to do it on TradingView. I don't think there is a way of doing it on TradingView, because it's a pretty computational intense calculation, and TradingView has its limitations. It can do complicated calculation, but up to a point when it basically cannot. It doesn't have a computational power to do that. So it will be cool to see how this quantity looks like with MicroStrategy. I will do it next, maybe in the next couple of days. I will show you some of the results. Was he able to detect this, this drawdown? I'm pretty sure he can. But this is what I was telling you for several days. Even without that measure, I was telling you, we'll be careful, because we went from crazy exponential to even crazy exponential. Look at this, right? An exponential that was 17 degrees went to 44 degrees, much steeper. Something needs to give. And we went through this correction. Hopefully we'll continue to go up, but you cannot have this sustained exponential growth. And there were all these crazy talks, all these spaces. I love MicroStrategy. It's an incredible idea. It's an opportunity, if people want to play with the options and all these different tools. But try to use your head too, okay? Right? Because come on, we had so many experiences. If you were last cycles, there were all these, oh yeah, you can be rich by stacking this, stacking that, doing this. At a certain point, the market crashes if it is not sustained by sensible things. This is why Bitcoin has been growing for 15 years, because it's a power law instead of being, this is exactly what I'm telling you. If you don't believe me, this is exactly what I'm telling you, right? But at a certain point, a crazy exponential dies, and sometimes it dies badly. Hopefully this doesn't happen with MicroStrategy, because I think there is still a lot of solid things in MicroStrategy. But if people started to treat it like a meme coin, somebody's getting burned sooner or later. So let's be careful. I mean, you cannot change people's behavior, but you can do your own action, right? Individually, you can decide, am I going to go here and start to participate? Maybe if you do it, do it for fun, do it with a small quantity of money, or maybe hedge your bets. Be careful, just be careful, okay? That's what I'm trying to say. I don't want to see you losing money, so be careful. All right. So this is what I have to say on this. If you don't have any other questions, we can close and we can see each other next time. Okay. All right, guys. Given that I don't see any other questions, it was super cool to be together on this Friday night. Come again. Let's see each other again. Thank you, guys. Thank you, and bye, everybody.